In this video, I will demonstrate 3 unique leaf projects using a tissue roll. I will timestamp each project so that you can jump to the one that catches your eye. Plus, I will share all the details and tricks for each and every project. The first project is about painting lemon leaves, and the second project is about mango leaves, and the third project is about painting crab apple leaves. Okay, let's dive in and get creative. So what I do is I take a tissue roll and gently squeeze at one end to form a leaf shape. Then I use it like a stamp to create leaf prints on my watercolor paper. I stamped 2 leaf prints one over the other, and I'm using wet on wet technique to paint the first leaf. To print the leaf outline by using tissue roll as a stamp, I used a mix of cobalt blue and lemon yellow. To paint inside the leaf using wet on wet technique, I'm using the same combination, which is a mix of cobalt blue and lemon yellow. I just vary the composition of this mix to get different shades in a leaf. Next, I paint the second leaf, which is underneath the first one. So for that, again, I'm using wet on wet technique. After wetting the second leaf, I applied lemon yellow, which is followed by a combination of lemon yellow and cobalt blue to paint the leaf. To paint the shadow part of the leaf, I'm using cobalt blue in butter consistency. By adding shadow to the leaf, we create depth in our painting. This creates realism in our artwork. Using light value of green, I paint the leaf stalks, and using brown hue, I paint the twig. To print the third leaf, again I dip the tissue roll on the pigment, which is a mix of cobalt blue and lemon yellow. Then I wet the area inside the leaf print. I applied lemon yellow at one end of the leaf, and then I mixed with cobalt blue to create a green, and I vary the composition of this cobalt blue and lemon yellow to create different shades in a leaf. Using light value of green, I paint the leaf stalk, and also using brown hue I extend the twig. I thought to add one more leaf. You can add as many leaves as you want and extend the length of the twig. I'm using same wet on wet technique and same pigments to paint this leaf. At the edge of the leaf I applied lemon yellow, and for rest of the area I used mix of cobalt blue with lemon yellow. For some areas I mixed cobalt blue with a touch of lemon yellow. For the shadow part of the leaf I used cobalt blue. When the paper is starting to dry or when it is completely dry, you can use lifting technique to depict the veins of the leaves. For lifting technique, we have to use a clean damp brush to lift the paint out of its place. Gently lift the pigment using the tip of your brush. To effectively lift the pigment, I advise you not to move your brush back and forth to lift the pigment. Just make a single stroke to lift the pigment. After lifting the pigment, wipe the brush on a wastecloth and then go over again on the pigment. After lifting the pigment a couple of times, wash the brush in clean water. Then make the brush damp by pressing it against on wastecloth. Again use this damp brush to lift the pigment from the paper. After lifting the pigment a couple of times, wash the brush in clean water. Then make the brush damp by pressing it against a wastecloth. Once the brush is damp, use it again to lift the pigment from the paper. We are nearing the completion of our first project. Next, we move on to the second leaf project of painting mango leaves. Mango leaves are known for their slender shape, meaning that they are narrow and elongated with a pointy tip. So, for that, we have to squeeze the tissue roll at the edge up to 75% to get that elongated shape. In the first project for lemon leaves, I squeezed the tissue roll up to 25%. For mango leaves, I squeezed the tissue roll up to 75% to get that slender shape. To print mango leaves, I used pigment which is a combination of lemon yellow and cobalt blue. Just dip the one end of the tissue roll on the pigment and make a stamp on the watercolor paper. I mixed cobalt blue with a touch of crimson lake. Then I added a lot of lemon yellow to this mix to get a deep green which is used to paint these leaves. I'm using wet on dry technique to paint these leaves. You can see that the leaf shapes are overlapped one over the other. This is to create realism in our painting. I carefully arranged the leaves in my mind, that is, which is going to be at the top and which is going to be at the bottom. I made the first leaf at the top, and so the second leaf is under that first leaf. So the shadow, we have to add shadow for the second leaf using cobalt blue. The third leaf is at the bottom of the first two leaves, so we have to add shadows of the first two leaves that falls on the third leaf. Again, I'm using cobalt blue to paint the shadowed area. To paint the shadow part of the leaf, use cobalt blue in butter consistency. Next, we are going to use the tip of the brush handle and we scratch out the pigment to create the veins of the leaf. After painting the leaves, add stems for the leaves. You can add as many leaves as you want and you can overlap them to create interesting leaf painting. While making leaf print, one important point I forgot to mention is I rotate the tissue roll in different directions. That is, I alter the orientation of the tissue roll to get leaves of different shapes. That is, the leaves will be turning in different direction when you change the orientation of the tissue roll. I mixed cobalt blue with permanent orange to get a brown hue which is used to paint the stem of the mango. We are going to paint two mangoes, one which is nearer to the viewer and the other is at distant. I made a small C at the left side and a mirrored C at the right side which is little bit bigger in size and connect them to form the mango shape. I used light value of lemon yellow to paint the mango shape. Then I mixed it with cobalt blue to get a green shade which is used to paint the base of the mango. Next I mixed lemon yellow with permanent orange and added to the mango. Then I added crimson lake for the remaining area and blended all the pigments. I added cobalt blue at the area where the mango is connected with the stem. Let us add another mango which is at distant from the viewer. This mango is smaller in size and I'm using the same pigments to paint this mango. That is, I used lemon yellow for the base layer and then I mixed it with cobalt blue to get a green hue which is used to paint the mango, and also I used permanent orange and crimson lake to paint this mango. We are nearing to the end of this second project. Next we move on to the third project in which we will paint crab apple leaves. I dip one end of the tissue roll into the pigment which is present on the palette and stamp it on the watercolor paper to create the leaf print. I'm using wet on wet technique to paint this leaf. On the palette I have a mix of cobalt blue, lemon yellow and a touch of permanent orange to get a deep green hue which is used for stamping the leaf shape and for painting inside the leaf. I added cobalt blue to the pigment that is already present in the palette to add more shades to the leaf. My leaf is still wet. I use the tip of the brush to drag the paint outwards slightly to create the sawtooth edge of a leaf. After adding sawtoothed edge for the leaf, I extend the length of the leaf as in the video. I will be creating 2 more leaves using same method, so I speed up the painting process in order to reduce the video length. The leaves are in drying stage. At this time, I use the handle of the brush to scratch some pigment to create the veins of the leaf. By mixing cobalt blue with a touch of permanent orange, creates a brown hue which is used to paint the stem of the leaves. Using permanent orange, I paint the crab apples, and with a touch of crimson lake, I create the shadowed area. Using light value of crimson lake, I add the stems for the crab apples. I hope you enjoyed painting different types of leaves using a tissue roll. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. See you in another video. Until then, take care and bye bye from Prema.